So when I asked first-year fiction MFA Carrieann Cahall what her talent was, she said verbatim that she's pretty sick at children's crafts. But that makes sense for somebody who actually had her eye on becoming a live-in nanny before she turned to writing. But because she's also a film editor and an amateur painter and sculptor, her job applications came with a few stipulations. And after countless families turned her down because they didn't have the kind of film editing studios and art studios in their houses that met Carrieann's specific needs, she had to turn to writing. And I think we're pretty lucky that she did. Let's please welcome Carrieann.
Just so you know, it's a frame narrative, so the frame is told in third person, the rest is in first. All right, it's called Currents. Her father existed once. He looked out over the cover of long grass, and a stray bullet slipped his spirit out through a betel nut-sized hole above his ear. It was the crooked ear with the tip that folded over, like a place marking in a book. His last thoughts were of how much the stiff peaks of grass tickled the underside of his chin, his fall cushioned by the same loose soil tucked underneath his fingernails, that red-rimmed hole the only sign of destruction. This is what the girl told herself. Her mother, however, told her this: "You will leave this place." Kneeling in a fog of incense smoke, eyes and feet prickling, the girl filled herself with the scent of burning wicks, the hum of monks' chanted prayers. It was the first time she was aware they could also bring devastation, that they weren't just men of endless blessing. She used to be able to distinguish her father's silhouette against the crowds at the night market, and now she couldn't tell him apart from the dirt that gathered alongside the propane stove. Whether it was enemy attack or friendly fire, no one could tell. One, more or less, meant the other in a civil war. With the fate, bless you, of her family uncertain, her father's ashes were dipped into the Mekong so that even if they all had to leave, they could still somehow remain. They tried to reassure her. They called it the American dream. All she could think was, how magical. On the last day at the resort, I slipped myself into a swimsuit from the lobby gift shop and go to the pool. I'm just about too old to play with the sunburnt kids in a corner of the shallow end, but much too young to gather around the adults. I choose the shallow end. My mother enters the water in a faded black, slightly sagging one piece I never knew she had. I watch her swim a graceful lap from one end to the other, my back against the pool wall, the concrete scratching at my shoulder blades. The youngest kid emerges from the water right in front of me. Come race us to that floaty. I'm too consumed with staring at my mother, who seems like an orca the way people move out of her way. Her hair inkier, so slick that sunlight glints off the strands. She passes by us close enough that when her lips barely creep above the surface, I see the spray of water that parts with her exhale. She doesn't look at me. I know how to swim, or I don't know how to swim, I say. The droplet-spotted goggles do little to hide his eye roll. That doesn't make sense why you're here then. The water drips down the side of my face. It makes my eyes sting. That's what I'm trying to figure out. He squints at me doubtfully and lets his feather-light body drift off without any more invitations to play. I watch as he joins the rest, taking turns dunking each other in the deep end. I pretend to be soaking in the sun, though I'm really watching them. The dark hair fin of my mother tracks in and out of frame during subsequent laps. I try, for a moment, pick my feet up from the bottom of the pool. I lean back into the water because I heard somewhere that floating on your back is easiest. They say it's natural, that we are meant to be buoyant because we are supposed to be able to prevent our own drowning. For a moment, I am light, but I start trying to understand how all my weight could possibly keep afloat, and so muscles tense. When water rushes into my ears, I straighten up and plant my feet to the pool floor. Up by the cabanas, the only other woman that looks anything like my mother and I walks between loose curtains separating each unit. She offers extra towels and recommends the Cafe Yen. My mother and I then arrive in Vientiane to stay with my grandmother, and it has been experienced in moments. Ice-cold Pepsi tasting best in a plastic bag, knotted around bendy straws, and sieving thumbnail-sized shrimp from a hole in the middle of a floating wooden pallet. We even went to a temple high up on stilts. I sat with my legs tucked under me, hands clasped, looking down at stray dogs from the spaces in the planked floor. My mother sat next to me, her eyes closed, head bowed, mouthing along to every word the monk recited. I wonder how lonely those dogs must have been, panting in the humid heat, waiting around for scraps to fall between the cracks. Could I drip between these ancient 2x4s? Would these mutts lap me up when nothing better poured down? I could imagine my mother spending an eternity praying in the same spot, never noticing the damp mark in the wood where I used to be. At a party later, celebrating our stay, everyone is yelling, but no one seems mad. Beer, lao, and rice whiskey fuel belly laughs. The women sweat over dented tin pots I could fit my body inside. The air is full of smoke and steam and people. Falong, they call me. It fills the space in any room I'm in, even after I took off the Nikes and put on the rubber sandals, even as I tried to pronounce the new words they were teaching me. I am darker than most of my cousins after spending so much time in the sun, yet they still all fondly call out Falong. I walk over to my mother at a table full of relatives, hoping for another ball of sticky rice rolled with salt. My uncle pulls me roughly into his side. He gives a little speech, shaking me tighter to his body with every punctuated sentence. Everyone at the table laughs, including my mother. It is a sound that makes me want to join the steam. He smiles, and I see the intact rice grains glistening on his gums. He chews while he talks. Tomorrow, go to Mekong, he says, loud and stilted. See the Naga. I nod, because it seems like the polite way to respond. He pats my lower back. It's my dismissal, I think, so I walk off, forgetting about the rice. That night, my grandmother insists I sleep in her room. My mother stays up late with siblings and cousins she hasn't seen in decades. She speaks a language she never taught me to a crowd that laughs and cries as if on cue. I can hear them muffled through the walls of my grandmother's room. I watched my grandmother rub Tiger Balm on her chest under the cover of the mosquito net. No words exchanged between us, just a banter of glances. In the dark, I pinch at her loose elbow and drift to sleep on the feel of her weathered, liquid skin rolling between my fingertips. The Mekong is smaller than I expected, at least in terms of width. There are not that many people out today. A few small, shaded boats float along, selling dehydrated squid and desserts wrapped in banana leaves. An English family taking photo after photo on their rusted tour boat passes by, an enthusiastic guide telling them about the mysteries of the river. The Naga is a large serpent believed to live in these waters. The family continues snapping their photos. Bestowed with protecting the city of Vientiane, the guide continues, locals offer up sacrifices as a request for safe travel across the Mekong. A bend takes the tour group out of sight, and I stroll further down the riverbank where there are less people. With the water free of boats or swimmers, I lift my dress up over my head and toss it into a bush so the mud doesn't stain the fabric. There is no time for wading. The water is a cool coat of lacquer on my skin, but quickly evens out to room temperature. My arms chop through the river in clumsy strokes, and my feet kick at a texture like runny cake batter. I accidentally take a gulp that will probably have me squatting in the bathroom in the middle of the night. I make it about 15 feet from the shore when that familiar tension in my muscles act up. I try to breathe through it, keep doing this act that feels like swimming, but my mind is already retreating. I imagine I spot the scaled back of a giant snake, or maybe I wish it, those peaked ridges upon which I could ferry to the other side, because I know there is something there that I can understand. But when a knot catches in one of my calves, I know I have to turn back. Nothing sinks faster than a foreigner in the Mekong, or so my uncle told me. Back on shore, I look down into the dirty water lapping at my bare toes. It is all silt and mineral and pale gray brown. I want to see reflection, but this is water things only disappear in. We are leaving, and my mother is rigid. The brim of her hat hides her eyes from me as I hug my grandmother on the steps of the patio. She gives me one long squeeze. It feels like I could roll her up, bones folding in nicely on the joints, and fit her under my arm like a sleeping bag. Then, when I am done giving my friends their leather strap bracelets, I will get to have this gift to myself, my grandmother, to wrap up in on cold nights. She says words I've never heard before, wouldn't be able to translate in my ear. It makes it hard for me to pull myself out of her embrace. When I step away, my hands trace the curve of my grandmother's arms to rest my elbows, or her elbows in my palms. She smiles at me, lips closed tightly, her eyes like polished skipping stones. On the plane ride home, my mother chooses the window seat. She spends her time fixated on her fingernails, long, durable, and usually polished. They're bare and uneven and packed with dirt, which she doesn't rush to scrape out. I set my hand down on her knee. She grabs it and cradles the offering in between both of hers. Soon my head is drooping onto my chest. I try to catch myself, but ultimately I fall asleep, the scent of tiger balm lingering on the front of my shirt. Mosquitoes buzzed in her ear, interrupted by the clicks of beetles and swaying grass. Her clothes clung to her in summer sweat, so uncomfortable that she was relieved to finally step into the tepid water. First feet, then knees, and with a discreet plop she was swimming. The river was calm this time of year, which is exactly why she was advised to go then. She swam across, thinking only of her own incense prayer. May the darkness of her hair match the darkness of the water at night. May her pale limbs not be beacons from the grass line. May refuge be kind to her. With every stroke she heard heavy-soled boots in mud, wide-leafed bushes cracking from their stems to greet the ground, the cocking of a gun. I am not tired, she thought. I will get across safely. I will see them all again. The last thing she considered was one day having a child, one who couldn't quite swim, but like her, would try every day not to drown. It was not a long distance, after all. Underneath the water, her feet grazed scales. Thank you.